sweetest victory of all.
Not only for the people who voted for us, but also for the people who voted against us. Once again, being elected as Prime Minister of the greatest country in the world.
Australia has looked to the future.
I am not frightened of an election.
That a good government was losing its way. Game on.
Welcome to the National Tally Room in Canberra for Australia Votes 2010, where we're ready to take you for a fascinating ride on what will be a nerve-wracking night for Julia Gillard, Tony Abbott and all their supporters. A night that one way or another is going to make history. We could even see the first hung parliament in 70 years. It's been a tumultuous 3 years, the end of the Howard era, the spectacular rise and fall of Kevin Rudd, the worst global recession in 75 years and near collapse of the world's financial system, the rise of Australia's first female Prime Minister and the ups and downs of 3 opposition leaders. Brendan Nelson's Liberal leadership does seem a long time ago now. This has been a wearing campaign for changing fortunes, with dramatically different stories in different states, and the latest public polling as well as the party's own private polling showing Labor in trouble, particularly in Queensland and New South Wales. And we're well set up to tell you the various stories as they unfold, fast and accurate. We've got Anthony Green's magical computer analysis, Stephen Smith and Nick Minchin, 2 of the sharpest analytical minds in politics when it comes to election counts. Tony Jones will chair a second expert panel with Penny Wong and George Brandis. And Lee Sales will keep you up to date with the big picture as the pattern of tonight's count takes shape. We'll also be crossing to crucial seats around the nation for insights on the ground. This is going to be quite a night. Just consider the import of today's published polls. Newspoll in the Australian, Nielsen in the Melbourne Age and Sydney Morning Herald. Both have Labor ahead in 2-party preferred terms, 50.2% with Newspoll, 52% with Nielsen. But a state-by-state breakdown of Newspoll's figures represent a nightmare for Labor, showing swings to Tony Abbott's coalition of 7.6% in Queensland and 6.2% in New South Wales. Theoretically, that alone would put 21 Labor seats at risk in those 2 states if the swing was uniform, and that's a big if. And Labor can only afford to lose 12 before its majority is gone. Anthony Green, can we use your chamber graphic to explain how the Parliament looked before today's vote, adjusted for the various redistributions?
Well, our starting point for tonight is that we say that Labor has 88 seats going into this election. That's taking account of the redistribution. 5 coalition seats have notionally become Labor held. There's 59 for the Liberal and National Party. With the formation of the LNP in Queensland, we've amalgamated the Liberals and Nationals for this election, and they'll be shown that way all evening. There's no Greens. Potentially they could gain some in this election, and 3 others. OK, now the potential Green seat and the 3 others, we could well be looking at a hung parliament. It could be one of several combinations. Yeah. You need 76 seats for a party, one side of politics, to be confident of governing in their own right. If you get 75, it's a tie. 74, you're a seat short of a majority. Both sides could end up with 73 or 74 seats with a balance of power in the middle there. Then there'd be negotiation. It's going to be, if it's that close, then we won't know that result tonight. That'll take several days of counting.
We most certainly won't. Stephen Smith, this is a nail-biting situation for you, and I would suggest there probably isn't a person in Australia who really knows the outcome tonight, but give us your best guess.
Well, at about this time in the last election, my best guess to Tony Jones before 6:30 was a Labor win, but it'll take me much longer than that tonight, if indeed there's a result tonight. I think anyone who tells you they can predict the outcome doesn't know. We will get down to 30 or more marginal seats throughout the country, the bulk of those in New South Wales and Queensland. That is where the election will be decided. I can find 60 seats which I think Labor will win. It's very difficult to find the next 16 that we need for a majority, and a lot will depend upon how the battle has gone on the ground. I think local incumbency will be a factor, but as Anthony has pointed out, we have 5 notional seats where a redistribution has given us a seat on paper, but where you have Liberal members, and where they dig in effectively, it's hard to toss them. OK. Nick Minchin, you've travelled around with Tony Abbott on this campaign, so you've seen a lot of it. I mean, in fact, it must have been a whirlwind at times. Yeah. So what's your feeling?
Well, the only prediction I feel confident of making, Kerry, is that Stephen Smith will no longer be Australia's Foreign Minister after tonight's election, because either we win and Julie Bishop becomes Foreign Minister, or Labor win and, unfortunately for Stephen's sake, Kevin Rudd becomes the Foreign Minister. But
I'm not sure that's actually a foregone conclusion.
Very tough on Stephen. But, well, clearly some sort of deal was done with Kevin Rudd.
I was under the impression we're here as analysts. He's rerunning the campaign.
OK, campaign's over.
Campaign's over.
Can you win
look,
tonight?
I agree with Stephen. I can't call it. It's one of the first elections I feel that I don't have enough capacity to call it tonight. There's a lot of voters have left at the last minute, a lot of seats that are, really marginal. You've had the redistribution has really made this a very difficult election to predict. I still think and have thought all the way through that for us to win 17 net additional seats is a very, very tough ask, but it's possible. But I won't be surprised at all if we don't have a result tonight, Kerry.
The South Australian election earlier this year is still fresh in my mind, where it looked from the news poll going into the Saturday that Labor had lost that election.
Yeah.
In fact, they got, as news polls suggested, only 48% of the two-party preferred vote, but because of their marginal seat campaigns, because they'd quarantined enough seats, they actually won.
Yep.
Now, do you see potential parallels here?
Well, as a South Australian, I'm very sensitive to that phenomenon, the capacity of Labor particularly to, as we say, sandbag its own seats with incumbent members, and incumbency is now a very powerful weapon. And obviously, as a Liberal, I fear that phenomenon again tonight, although there are a number of seats that are on the Labor list, of course, where they don't have incumbents. And that will be a problem for Labor tonight.
Well, lots of swirls and eddies, and there's going to be plenty for us to talk about. Julia Gillard is watching the count tonight from her home base in Melbourne. Labor has set up its headquarters at the Melbourne Conference and Exhibition Centre. Chris Uhlmann is there, and he joins me now. So, Chris, what intelligence have you picked up about the tensions behind the scenes at Labor headquarters, and whether there is any sense of confidence at all?
Well, I'd say the mood is anxious at the moment, which is better than yesterday, because yesterday it was despondent and despairing, Kerry. Interestingly, the Labor Party kept its tracking polling going until last night, and when they went to bed last night, there were 10 seats that were 50-50. So that's how close it is, and depending on how those seats fall, of course, if they all fall one way, it might not look so close in the end, but it certainly is. So the mood that I've picked up in the camp is that everyone is anxious, but that's not just here, that's the mood across both parties at the moment. And as your panel says, everyone's of the same mind. No one can call this, although there are some on the Liberal Party side who believe they'll fall just short.
Now, Julia Gillard, of course, like Tony Abbott, will make an appearance at some stage tonight, but it's absolutely in the lap of the gods as to whether she will be either claiming victory or conceding defeat. So it could be quite late before we see her.
Absolutely. She has been here, Kerry. Apparently she dropped in briefly. She's staying at a hotel nearby, so she came through the convention centre a little bit earlier on. Of course, the detail's been here, but now she's gone back to her hotel. Now, she will be in the convention centre, we understand, from around about 7 p.m. this evening, but it may not be until very late in the night, indeed, until we see her, and it'll be interesting to know whether or not she will be claiming victory, conceding defeat, or saying, let's wait and see.
Well, we can have some fun with the figures in the meantime. A lot hanging on this nonetheless. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks,
and having fought an incredible campaign, the marathon man Tony Abbott is in Sydney tonight. He'll face his moment of truth at Liberal Party headquarters at the Four Seasons Hotel. And Mark Simpkin is standing by there now. Mark, again, what's the mood behind the scenes? I mean, traditionally at this time of the night, there's not much action at headquarters, but behind the scenes, I'm quite sure there's a lot of nail-biting going on.
I don't think there would be any nails left tonight, even this early, Kerry. They're not quite daring to hope yet. I spoke to the campaign director a short time ago. He said there is definitely a swing on. There is something happening, but is it enough? Is it in the right seats? They're not quite sure. And of course, it's all relative, the potential success for Tony Abbott. A victory would indeed be a famous victory. If they fall a few seats short, well, there'll obviously be disappointment. But at the same time, when you look at where the Liberal Party or the coalition was less than a year ago, when Tony Abbott was not even the leader, there was some expectations in the party they could even lose 30 seats at this election and be out of power for the best part of a decade. So that will also be feeding into the thought success is relative.
In fact, the most telling aspect at this late stage of this election, even those who are daring to predict a victory for their side are only doing it by 1 or 2 seats.
Exactly, and it could be somewhat poetic, I suppose, if Tony Abbott ends up winning the election by 1 seat. He won the leadership by 1 vote, and that's just what's so extraordinary about this election. I was talking to a BBC reporter here. He was saying, what's going on? I thought it was going to be Malcolm Turnbull against Kevin Rudd. There was just so many variables. One of the variables, of course, is just the way the quite extraordinary campaign, an unexpectedly extraordinary campaign that Tony Abbott has run. He's approached it like a marathon, as you say, with the focus, the discipline that people didn't expect he would be able to do. He had a very bad campaign as a health minister 3 years ago, but this one has been very hard fought, and hence we will see later tonight if it was successful.
Mark, thanks for that. We're now a mere 10 minutes into the count, but the numbers are going to start trickling in any minute, and we'll grab the opportunity while we can for a brief news bulletin with Deborah Rice, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.